All right, guys, I'm just going to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here bringing our 2024 preview and prediction for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Full in-depth breakdown, looking at this coaching staff, a new look, one in Tuscaloosa. Kalen DeBoer with 102 and 14 career record in 9 seasons as a head coach. Insane statistics there. Just took Washington to the national championship. Nick Sheridan, he was the Washington tight end coach past couple of seasons. Will be the offensive coordinator after Ryan Grubb opted to go back to Seattle for the Seahawks. Kane Womack, last 3 years as South Alabama's head coach. These guys were previously on the same staff at Indiana many years back. Alabama, they win the SEC, make the CFP after a rough September, and then Nick Saban, right after the loss to Michigan, calls it a career. Just a big thank you to Nick Saban for being just such a great coach, great for the game of college football, and more importantly, just a great leader and mentor. Nick, obviously this is tough to see Nick walk away from the game, but, DeBoer and his family have been embraced with open arms, and I think Nick, he said that this was, the best timing to do it. He's still going to be around the program at least for the next couple of seasons, but this is certainly going to be sad, and it's going to be very, strange to not see him on the sidelines on Saturdays.
I'm going to keep it short since we've talked about this in the past. Obviously, Nick Saban has done absolutely incredible things for the University of Alabama, my alma mater. Such an inspirational figure to me and many other young men, just not even as a football coach, but as an inspirational figure with his leadership quotes and all those things in Tuscaloosa really built and changed the university for the better, opened up doors for myself and many other students to come down and discover Alabama and get a degree there and get a great education and watch a fantastic football team. I'll be forever thankful to Nick Saban, and I'll cut it there. Obviously, now we move into the Kalen DeBoer era. This is an exciting opportunity, I think, for DeBoer, and I think it's a great opportunity for Alabama. I'd always said I wanted a Saban disciple, but in the end, we ended up getting DeBoer, who I think is just as good as any of the options that were available who previously coached under Nick Saban. That record speaks for itself, 102 and 14. Took Washington to the national championship game last year. A very decorated coach, two-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year in 2022 and 2023. Won the AP Pac-12 Coach of the Year award those same year. AP Coach of the Year in 2023. Took him to the national championship game, won the Pac-12 in a great shootout in Vegas, won the Sugar Bowl in another great game, and now he steps in and has great resources in Tuscaloosa. He brings in his former tight ends coach with him, and anytime you can hire a former head coach to be a coordinator, whether offensive or defensive coordinator, that's incredible. South Alabama were really building something positive. They were in a bowl game this past year. They've been in bowl contention in the past as well, so I'm really happy to have Kane Womack down here calling the defensive plays in Tuscaloosa. I'm very excited for this new era. Obviously, I miss Nick Saban dearly, and it's going to be tough not seeing him on the sideline. It will certainly be an adjustment, but he'll be on game day. He'll still be around the program and be around the sport that he loves, the sport that he's been such an important figure of. But I'm super excited for this new era in Tuscaloosa. I cannot wait to see what Alabama football looks like this year.
Then moving ahead, looking at this offense, DeBoer, obviously a guy who loves multiple wide receiver sets to really spread out the field horizontally. Looks to create mismatches, implements, a bit of a West Coast air raid style of play. Fast pace, RPOs are used, lots of crossing routes, and just a lot to get into with this offense. And obviously Jalen Milroe at quarterback, he really struggled early on in the season, but this guy has proved to be a great runner with exceptional speed, big arm, one of the most beautiful deep balls I've ever seen. Really learned to be a patient runner, though, the back half of the year, and it paid dividends for this offense. They started using his legs properly, and he delivered. Took big steps in learning to trust his protection, identifying defenses. Still needs the progress in terms of accuracy and that mental processing. You really seen that against Michigan, how he got exposed in that regard. Great upside with DeBoer, though, Nick. A lot of people, for whatever reason, weren't sure how this would work out initially, and obviously we haven't even taken the field just yet. But I think this could be a match made in heaven, because those things you worry about with Milroe in terms of mental processing, accuracy, DeBoer just had Michael Penix and turned him to an absolute superstar. Very similar style of player, right? 6'2", 220, the big arm, the athletic upside as well is there. And I think that DeBoer is going to really mold Jalen Milroe into a Heisman candidate here. And obviously maybe there's lofty expectations, but I think that's going to be a pinpoint needle on what's going to happen here with this pairing. I think it's a great one, and I think Milroe's going to just significantly improve his game in 24.
I expect Milroe to continue to take huge strides. Had a really great second half of the season. Looked fantastic against Tennessee. Looked phenomenal against LSU. In the later part of the season, looked good against Auburn at times. Struggled a little bit against Georgia, but that was a fantastic defense, and he did get the job done, completing clutch passes at times and making nice moves towards the sideline and running against Georgia in clutch situations, kind of move the clock, move the chains, and get Alabama over the finish line to win the SEC title game. There were some issues in the Rose Bowl. I was a little disappointed by his performance, but the offensive line did let him down in that game. But Milroe returns here and has a great opportunity to be a star quarterback. 2,800 yards passing, 65.8% comp rate, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. The turnover bug, we were worried about it, and it certainly was an issue early on, but as the season went on, the turnover problem really seemed to turn away and didn't really show its ugly head for much of the second half of the season, which I think is a positive thing. When you plug in a guy like DeBoer who's going to run that air raid offense like you were talking about, having a quarterback that can really specialize that deep ball. We saw Penix launch the deep ball on several occasions last year. If they're going to use the deep ball, uncork it with Milroe, this offense could be absolute dynamite as long as the receivers find themselves in a good position, get downfield, and beat those secondaries.
In total, they return 6 starters. They lose their top 3 pass catchers, top 2 rushers depart. So a good bit of turnover. This backfield, Jam Miller, guy with some good speed, working on being versatile with his route running. It's something he's really improving on. He caught 2 big swing passes in 2023, 5'10", 211. He showed physicality running at times. Most experienced back on the team. A lot of people think Justice Haynes, though, is going to be the guy that takes the lead here. Elite balance, a finisher. Quick feet with lateral agility. I like the short area burst, a downhill one-cut runner. Did have a lot of mileage on him in high school. He really provided a spark versus Michigan, though, with a few runs off that left side. And overall, the cap off the running back room, Richard Young, he was a near top 100 recruit last year. Another one-cut inside power back. Daniel Hill, he was a 5th-ranked true freshman athlete. 231 pounds. He has the skill set to play running back. They think he has good suddenness and route running as well. So, from names outside of Haynes, a lot of these guys aren't going to stick out to you. But you saw what a good running back can do last year. Dylan Johnson, he was the only guy who really got touches, and he was able to really deliver frequently, especially in the back half of the season. So the run game is not completely immune in this system. So you throw in Milroe's legs and some of these guys, and a lot of empty sets, a lot of variety here. And this run game could certainly be an asset, Nick. Is that the expectation for you, or do you think they're going to be focused on more of a pass-heavy offense?
I think they will find a nice balance between the passing and running. I think they will lean a little bit more to the passing, but I think it's going to be closer to a 60-40, 55-45 split. Milroe's legs, obviously 531 yards, 12 touchdowns for Milroe. Really good numbers from him. I think Miller is going to be fantastic for this offense. 201 yards on the ground, 4.9 yards per carry, 1 score for him. Also 4 receptions out of the backfield, including a touchdown on wheel routes. Very solid numbers there. I think Justin Haynes, is a fantastic player. Obviously, a high-rated former 5-star out of high school, 168, 6.7, and 2 scores. For him in limited carries, I think he's got great potential there to really blossom. Richard Young, a great rotational piece. I think this backfield is just fine, and when you add that completely exciting threat with Jalen Milroe that you have there, this could be a really nice punch. We saw it last year with Washington where they weren't relying entirely on the pass. They were using the run to complement the pass. They had a nice balance, in my opinion, when you watch the film on it. I think Alabama will have a similar balance where it's kind of that pass first, but running is going to be a very nice option. I think these backs all can really have good skill set and really help out this offensive attack.
And you look at the wide receiver room, another group that doesn't exactly have, elite standouts in terms of names at the moment. But these are guys who are former high-end recruits. Kobe Prentice, a good combo of hands, speed, and tenacity. An elite change of directioner. Fluid runner, played the second most slot snaps of anyone at 5'10", 182. Kendrick Law, good yak, ability to the high point, a bit of a top-notch athlete with some good twitch. The ball skills and the awareness are there. Stop, start, burst is great. Considered the fastest player on the team. Was used as a bit of a gadget player last year, but got limited touches. You're certainly going to see, improvement in that area. And a guy they're really going to have to lean on, Gurmy Bernard from Washington, used as a motion player, came across the formation often, some good speed, the abilities in the open field. He was able to bring down contested catches. He was going to be Washington's number 1 wide receiver if DeBoer stayed put this upcoming season. So I think he's going to have a big year. And I'm looking at a guy in Jaron Hamilton, an ex-4-star who has great body control, considered a go ball specialist with high point instincts, good catch radius. Sounds like a perfect fit, Nick. He's also 6'1", 200. Pretty similar size to what they had out wide last year. A guy like Jalen Polk, for example, with 1,100 yards, 6'2", 204. Not quite the jump ball specialist Rome Odunze was at 6'3", 215. This guy seems like he could really thrive in this system. We'll talk about the depth here in a minute, which is certainly iffy. But the 4 names I just rattled off, these guys are going to be all producers, I say, in this offense.
I think Kobe Prentice is going to be able to step up. 314 receiving yards last year, 17.4 yards per grab, 2 scores for him. Really talented player. Kendrick Law, waiting for him to break out. He has the opportunity to do so. 135 and 9 yards per grab for him. No touchdowns, but he looks to get on the board and get in the end zone. Jeremy Bernard, I'm super excited for him coming over from Washington. He could be a really great standout player in that Z position. I'm really excited for him. And Jaron Hamilton, I like the size, a very excited player. We'll talk about the depth in a second. We also have, I think Alabama has some solid depth. Apologize for saying we. Alabama has some solid depth at tight end as well. We're going to highlight. So I do think this wide receiving room, on paper, it's missing those crazy top tier punching names that you used to see with Alabama. But I do think it has some nice rotational depth that could really work for Milroe and company.
You look at Emmanuel Henderson, he was a high-ranked running back in the class of 22. They're going to move him to wide receiver of good speed and athletic ability. Rest is pretty much unknown with him. High-end 5-star Ryan Williams, a natural separator with top-notch yak abilities. They also landed Caleb Odom, 99th overall recruit. 6'5", was a tight end in high school of contested catch ability. Catches the ball away from his body very well. C.J. Dupree, a guy who really didn't touch the ball at all last year. At Maryland, though, he was known as a red zone target with, good frame and physicality. Solid open field pass catcher. Josh Cuevas from Washington should factor in here as well. Obviously Jack Westover was frequently, leaned on at the sticks, was big in the playoffs for them. System does a good job of sneaking tight ends as check down options. It's a young group. They have impressive talent that really seems to fit the system well, Nick. And I think that's the biggest thing here is a lot of people bashing this receiving core because they don't know any of these names. But I think you're going to know at least 3 or 4 of them coming to the end of the year because I think there's some really good fits here. And if these guys can step up and, DeBoer can develop them really fast in the system, it's going to be a tough group to stop.
This is going to be a tough group to stop. I think there are some solid players here that you can plug in. I like Dupree. He didn't get a lot of touches, but I thought he was really solid at Maryland. And the touches he did get were some clutch first downs. Solid player, C.J. Dupree. I'm glad he's back. 187 yards receiving, 17 yards per grab for him. Robbie Oots, another veteran tight end, only had a few grabs, but he did have a touchdown last year. Good veteran leadership there to have. In that, Ryan Williams, I'm super excited about him, a 5-star. I saw him play at Saraland when I was covering Alabama High School during my senior year at the University of Alabama. He was absolutely insane. He absolutely torched a really solid defense for Saraland, Alabama. They were incredible in the Alabama 5th A division of high school football. Ryan Williams originally decommitted after Saban retired. There was some, questions whether or not he would flip potentially to Auburn, but he ends up staying, committing to Alabama, and he's locked in at a really good depth piece of that wide receiver X. He may not break out this year, but next year I certainly think he'll have that breakout potential. I'm excited to see what Williams can do in year 1.
Now you look at the offensive line, a unit that certainly has kind of underperformed at times. The rushing attack certainly has taken a bit of a dive, and they were, once again towards the bottom of FBS and sacks allowed. Caden Proctor, obviously it's been his, entire offseason has been very interesting. He was much better over the back half of the season. Really got abused by experience, quickness and hands against Landon Jackson. Led to a horrid game versus Arkansas. Even got countered inside. He was too big at one point. Really couldn't get out of his stance as quick. Strength wasn't up to par either, but at 6'7", 354. I think he's very happy for where his progression's at. Showed that short area burst and aggressive punch in high school, though. Elijah Pritchett, he's yet to break out. Stands out much in the run game, though. He can latch on and drive. Length is pretty good. Gets this second level well. I know left tackle was just a bit of an issue for Alabama last year. Proctor going into his second season, though, obviously, after giving up 12 sacks. He's going to improve significantly. Losing J.C. Latham at right tackle is certainly going to be a big issue, and that's probably the biggest question mark. Will Conformity right now and Miles McVay are probably going to be battling for that spot. But I think what really stands out here is the interior is phenomenal. Jaden Roberts, he was great versus Michigan. One of the only guys that was, great strength. Comes off like a mauler. Tends not to always keep his feet moving, though. He can often lose his balance. Needs to understand leverage better. The hand placement and pass pro can also be a little wild. Overall, Jaden Roberts was a very good player, though, for Alabama. Tyler Booker, a wide base at 6'5", 352, strong hands, generates movement at the first level well, like the hand placement and power. He did have a tough day as a pass blocker against Michigan. Obviously, the blitz packages really compromised him. Has great movement for his size, though. And then Parker Brailsford, a bit of a guy who is undersized, 6'2", 275, has athletic ability that really perfectly fit this scheme, has physicality and great range. Obviously, Seth McLaughlin was not a very good center for them. A lot of wild snaps. In Milroe, the one thing he really needed to learn this offseason was those blitz packages, understanding pre-snap better, because against Michigan, it was a disaster, not just for him, but this offensive line as well, Nick. And I think that's certainly something DeBoer is definitely going to help with. And another thing that's probably not going to be talked about enough is this Alabama offensive line has tremendous size, right? But they need athleticism. They have a good deal of pulling to the edge. releasing in the open space on screens and perimeter plays. And these guys might be too big for that, Nick, so I certainly think that the size they have might be a bit of a disadvantage for this DeBoer scheme. So that's one thing I really have as a question mark right now that no one else is probably going to talk about. But I think, early in September, we're going to have those questions answered very quickly.
That's a very fair question. I am interested to see how that develops for this team. This offensive line, I do like where they're heading. Caden Proctor, obviously there was a whole lot of drama with that. Went to Iowa, came back, the NIL, all that stuff was really weird. Not really too sure what exactly happened. Happy to have him back because he did improve as the season went on. I know he didn't have a great game against Michigan, but in general, he had a good season, especially the second half. And as more reps, more snaps for him, he will get better at left tackle. Elijah Pritchett, you can move him around. He's a really solid player. Tyler Booker, a fantastic guard. I like him a lot. Some nice freshman depth there as well. Casey Poe, William Sanders are two highly rated freshmen that are at left guard depth. Parker's Brailford steps in. A nice transfer, a good get for this Alabama offensive line. Jaden Roberts, I like him a lot. A really solid, very stable, really good player. Both guards, Booker and Roberts, are fantastic, stable veteran players who got good leadership. Right tackle. Yes, I am concerned about right tackle. I think Miles McVay, Wilkin Fromby, they're going to continue to fight it out. I think Fromby has the edge right now. I am concerned about that. I'm not entirely sure what right tackle is going to look like. I do think there's a lot of question marks there. But overall, I think this offensive line is really solid. The snaps were a big issue last year. McLaughlin being gone will hopefully put that to bed and no longer have Milroe have to continue to make busted plays into something special, which he did on a few occasions. I like where this offensive line is heading. I think Booker and Roberts in the interior at left and right guard is a fantastic 1-2 punch. Bringing Proctor back was a nice add as well.
In Pro Football Network, the three guys I talked about on the interior, they said that all three of them were in the top four of their interior offensive line coming into the season. I mean, that's pretty absurd. Back to right tackle for a second. It's really going to come down to McVay, who's 6'6", 350. Might not have the agility just yet to fit in as a starter, but he can handle speed rushers and has some good natural strength. And Wilkin Formby, he probably has better athletic ability, more fit for a power scheme, but has the upside to be a nice people mover and, execute in space. The only real natural fit for the scheme seems to be Brailsford at the moment. We'll see how that goes. They added a great kicker as well, Graham Nicholson, the Lou Groza Award winner, hit 96% last season. That's something that's going to be underrated as well. And the offensive verdict overall, I think Milroe's going to take massive steps in the scheme with this coach. Supporting cast isn't screaming off the board in terms of current first-round talent or anything like that. But they have lots of good football players still here, guys that either fit the scheme or can be incorporated with creativity. The offensive line might be oversized for some of the space they want to utilize, but I think you'll see a stronger approach from the run game, something we unexpectedly saw from Washington last year, and it benefited them. So I think DeBoer is going to have some real nice tricks up his sleeve, Nick. And I don't want to just be all positives here, but I think this is a nice use of variety here, along with the quarterback they have. I think DeBoer could really do some unspeakable things with this offense.
I'm extremely excited for this offense. I think adding Graham Nicholson at kicker was a great add. Was perfect on field goals at Miami, Ohio. His one missed extra point was blocked. Outside of that, he was perfect on extra points. Fantastic kicker, really solid player. Grabbing him and plugging him, replacing their kicker who had left, Will Reichert, to go to the NFL. I think that's a very solid add, underrated add. I think their other offensive portal adds and Bernard and Brailsford are two huge gets. I like Milroe a lot to lead it. Another underrated thing, I don't think this is super important, but I think I want to note that Ty Simpson did not transfer out of the program, a highly rated quarterback coming out of high school. There were rumors that he might try to leave and go get starting time somewhere else. He could certainly start at other programs, potentially in the SEC. But Simpson stays. He's going to stick with the program, be a nice guy to have in the backup room there. I think that's a really underrated thing to keep your quarterback's room kind of tight like that. I do like that a lot, considering they did lose some other quarterback to the portal. I like this offense a lot. I'm super excited. I think these guys will step up, these younger guys on offense. That wide receiving room definitely is very young, but I think there's a lot of potential. I can't wait to see what this offense does.
Looking at the defensive side of the ball, a unit that was, really good. Probably could have been a lot better. Chris Braswell and Dallas Turner depart. Those guys at times went silent. They returned 5 starters. Justin Igbaby, sizable loss on the D-line. Starting corners and Caleb Downs are gone. So obviously a lot of turnover, right? But I think this is a good defense overall. And starting with LT Overton coming over from A&M, seems primed for that bandit role. Has the versatility to play anywhere on the D-line. An X5 star of a strong athletic profile at 265 pounds. Has advanced quick twitch. A slippery player at the point of attack. Had limited production to this point, but 2022 was a good year for him. You look at Tim Smith on the interior, good balance and hands from his high school wrestling days. Strong lower body, doesn't have great range, and is yet to become a true difference maker, but has played well versus tough opponents at 302 pounds. Jaheim Otis, athletic, explosive regardless of his size. He's lost a lot of weight. Quick first step in that weight loss does showcase the work ethic he has along with some quick feet. This defensive line, they get back virtually everyone. I think it's a very deep group. I really like Damon Payne's play. He was a poor tackler in the hole, but showcased some nice lateral movement, took on some double teams. The ability to disengage was nice. Tim Keenan was a good run stopper. Had, bit of a mid-season slump, but was good at the end of the season. James Smith, a high-end 4-star from last year's class. I like his pursuit. Explosive player, is great at getting upfield. Jamarian Latham was below average. He'll battle with, Overton for that bandit defensive end spot. It's a deep rotation of great size. No elite standout, but a unit that only get better, Nick. I think this is really good for Alabama. Igboigbe is a bit of a loss, but I don't think people are going to be talking about how deep they are until they finally see him on the field producing and showing up against the run.
Overton, a fantastic ad for A&M, a really good player, has got SEC experience, a high-level recruit when he was coming out of high school. Certainly like that ad. I think Tim Keenan returning him was big, 38 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack for him. Really solid player. I think Damon Payne is a really good player. We're still trying to see him get those higher tackle numbers. He had 9 tackles last year, 1 tackle for loss, half a sack. Jamarian Latham, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 8 total tackles for him, a player that could really step up. I think he's a really good player top to bottom. When you look at it, you add in, you return Tim Smith, who's another good veteran for this team, 31 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks for him. Really good numbers. Jaheim Otis as well, defensive tackle. I think Otis could have a big year. We're waiting for that. 26 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and half a sack for him. Keelan Keeley, the highly rated 5-star, who was a true freshman last year, didn't play a whole lot. He's looking to have an impact off the edge. Alabama beat out Notre Dame to get his commitment, a really solid player that could step up this year on the edge. I think this is a good unit. I think there's nice depth, nice rotational pieces here. I expect this unit to be very strong this year.
Keon Keeley, the number 3 overall ranked recruit in last year's class, a guy with great speed and power, has good moves ready, could be a hybrid with his great first step, downhill authority, seems better suited to be a defensive end, but has the physical tools to thrive as a stand-up backer. And obviously that Wolf linebacking position, that's the one that they like to use in terms of, variety in Kane Womack's system. Plenty of options here. Quantrius Robinson was a great run defender, his limited snaps, higher upside pass rush pedigree comes from the younger cats, though. We alluded to Keeley, but also Keanu Cook, who Womack referred to as a freak. 2 redshirt freshmen, Deontez Pierre, who has great explosiveness. Kuira Saw, a quick twitched player with limited length but has good power. This is one thing that Alabama probably is not getting a lot of love for, Nick, because these guys I just rattled off were all high-end recruits. Robinson's a veteran, but they're absolutely loaded in terms of defensive end and pass rushing prowess, and I think you're going to see these guys finally step up here in year 2. Which one will it be? We don't know, but the rotation right now seems incredibly stacked, and even though they lose some high-end talent, like Dallas Turner, I think these guys are going to be well-equipped to step in here and take over. And they didn't transfer out of the program. All of these guys could have left. They ended up losing, I think it was 17 guys on the defensive side of the ball. None of them came from this side, Nick, up front. I think there's a lot of, potential right here. It's probably not getting a lot of love.
Good continuity, great depth. I think Robinson's a great player. 24 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sack. A lot of continuity, a lot of guys staying in this front defensive part of this unit. Really good players. You add in Overton, who's a really solid add from A&M. Keeley, I expect him to step up and be a star this year. Smith, Keenan, Daron Payne, all guys that could have big years. Robinson, really excited for him. This is a great part of this defense. This front defense is very strong, and I really think this caps off and kicks off a really solid defense here for Alabama.
Biggest news for them is they get both their inside linebackers back. Deontay Lawson, thought he was the nation's most improved defender. Rangy, lateral, a guy who's got good acceleration. His improved play recognition significantly helped, matching it with his already stellar instincts. That was one thing he really struggled with 2 years ago, was just play recognition. And Jahad Campbell, love the awareness from him. He can really struggle to shed lateral blocks, though. Has great closing speed. The pursuit checks out. He's an elite athlete, 6'3", 230. He can drop into coverage. It was difficult for him to get into the backfield, though. Wasn't really used as a pass rusher much. He certainly can do that if they want him to. He was his first year starting. So I think Jahad Campbell has a lot left to in terms of untapped potential. Justin Jefferson didn't play much as a JUCO ad last year, a smaller player, but has great speed. Jeremiah Alexander, ex-5-star edge that sits at 249 pounds. Very good at playing the run, great athleticism. They expect him to be, helpful in this linebacking room. Another part of the defense, Nick, that's probably not getting a lot of love is these 2 inside linebackers, some of the depth they have. I think Lawson and Campbell this year are absolutely going to thrive, even though the schematic change could lead to some growing pains.
Schematic change is certainly something to take a look at. Deontay Lawson, Jahad Campbell, the second and third leading tacklers on this team, respectively. Caleb Downs was the team's leading tackler who has left the program, but you get 2 of 3 out of your top tacklers back. That's certainly of note to me. Lawson, 67 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 4 pass breakups. Campbell, 66 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, an interception, 3 pass breakups, 2 fumble recoveries as well. These two, a great 1-2 punch there, and the linebacking core, they also have some solid depth. They're going to plug in different guys. Like you said, you mentioned some other players. You're going to plug in Jefferson and Alexander when you need to. Some also highly touted freshmen coming in as well. I think the linebacking core is in a great spot. Yes, losing Dallas Turner is tough, although he's kind of moved around a little bit towards the end of his tenure in Tuscaloosa. This is a great linebacking core, in my opinion. I'm really excited to see what they can do.
And before I move to the secondary, I kind of want to allude to the scheme that we haven't really talked about too much. This is going to be a 4-2-5 under Kane Womack. A lot of people don't know his dad, Dave, essentially created this scheme alongside Bud Foster and Gary Patterson. So there's no one better to talk about, the scheme with than him, or to learn it from, I guess you could say it from a player perspective. Speed and anticipation from the secondary is a big key. Obviously, he's a good mentor. Rarely going to see man coverage. The idea is obviously to break on every throw, gang tackle quickly, allow no yak. Lots of cover 3. They use nickel on every play. And the reason I say that is because this is going to be a bit of a sheltered scheme, I think, early on to allow, these guys to kind of pick up what's being laid down. And the reason I say that is because there are so many guys, that are, especially in this corner room, that are just incredibly young. Right now you're looking at Xavier Brown, a true freshman who's likely going to be a starter. Plays great tight man coverage, nice quick feet, has some advanced technique. He has some nice physicality in space. And then you look at the rest of these corners. Damani Jackson, he played with bad technique, showed a lack of IQ and awareness at USC, a very poorly coached positional group at Southern Cal. Xavier Mincy's incoming 5-star, a good fluid mover, a good length. He's helpful in run support. Jaleel Hurley, a top 100 recruit last year. Jalen Mabaki, 12th overall, elite athlete who thrives in press man with patience and suddenness. I just counted 4 5-stars right there, Nick, who all have limited experience, and that's concerning. Devontae Smith, he's finally healthy, figures to be the starting free safety or maybe the slot. Another true freshman at Red Morgan's vying for the same role. Depth and experience are issues, but the upside is higher than probably anyone else in CFB. Deshaun Jones, they added him late in the cycle, and then safety King Mack as well. We'll talk about more in Sab in a minute, Nick, but what do you think about this cornerback unit? Very young, but absurd amounts of talent. And that's why I think they're going to be coached into a position to be kind of sheltered, kind of like the Los Angeles Rams always did, where it's a secondary where, it's kind of basic for, screwing up. It can't happen is basically what I'm saying. And I don't expect too many screw-ups here because I think they're going to be coached a certain way where they're going to be put in a great position to succeed by Kane Womack.
As I mentioned earlier, adding a former head coach as defensive coordinator is always a great add, and Womack's going to put together this 4-2-5. I love the 4-2-5 personally. I played a lot of NCAA football when I play that. Make of that what you will. I do think it's a fantastic defensive system. Jim Knowles and Ohio State have been running that for the past couple of seasons, and we've seen Ohio State improve defensively over the last couple of years. I think Knowles has really implemented that system well. I think the 4-2-5 is a very exciting system. I really like that Alabama's making this transition at this point in time. I think Brown at cornerback stepping up as a 5-star true freshman. We saw it last year with Downs, who's a true freshman, made impacts. Obviously, losing Downs is a disappointing loss. I was really hoping he would return. But you have Brown at left cornerback, who could be really good. Damani Jackson transfers in. We'll see if he can step up and play at the pace of play in the SEC. Devontae Smith, if he's fully healthy, he can be a really talented player for them. Jaleel Hoy, like you said, another highly rated recruit. Red Morgan, another highly rated recruit that is battling. There is a lot of talent oozing out of this defense. They don't have a lot of experience. There's a young unit in the SEC that does worry me a little bit. But you got non-conference in the early SEC slate to kind of get yourself adjusted before you play those heavy hitters in the second half of the season. I really do like where this defense is right now, especially the secondary unit. We haven't talked about the leadership that returns with Moore and then Keon Slab stepping in.
Yeah, Malachi Moore, obviously he really had a big bounce back year after coming out of the doghouse last season. And, they could keep him at the slot, right? But they really need him at safety, Nick. There's no debate here that he needs to play that the Minka Fitzpatrick type role from many years back. He was good in coverage, regardless of the depth, physical tackler, showed good IQ, should really thrive in coverage, bounced back big time, like I alluded to. He'll need to limit the separation more in terms of breaks, but Moore, he was great this past season. Probably wasn't as great as Brian Branch, but Moore, I think this is exactly what he needed this past season. I think he's ready to be a leader for them in the back end. And then Keon Sabb, highly instinctive, good in coverage, fights for the ball at the catch point. He was elite in the national title game against Washington. sound run defender, like the ball skills. Certainly needs to prove himself in a single high looks more. He didn't really do that much last year, but in this scheme, it's never going to happen. You're not going to be in single high very often. So I think this is a nice safety duo. I think Sab's going to continue to develop and be great. And more, though, he's got to be a leader. He's got to step up. He's got to be one of the higher graded defenders on this roster, Nick, and I certainly think he will. And if he doesn't, they're obviously probably going to struggle in the back end.
Malachi Moore has to step up and be a leader. Had a really great 2020 campaign during the COVID year. 2021 and 2022 were very poor for him, made a ton of mistakes, really, like you said, ended up in the doghouse, in Nick Saban's doghouse, not a spot you want to be. Had a better 2023, definitely got better as the season went on, and was a good leader for this team. 52 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups, and a pick for Moore. He's the returning leader here. He's got to step up. Sab is a great add. I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think the secondary unit is a very solid unit. They're just very young and experienced. It's going to be a trial by fire sort of thing. Again, like I said, luckily you kind of ease your way in. Tough road test at Wisconsin early on this season. Going to be a trial by fire, see what the secondary can do. I do like this new system change. I think the schematic change is very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to what this defense can do under Womack.
Defensive verdict, another offseason under Saban would have been massive for this front six, 7 in his scheme, but nonetheless, these are veterans that should have well-established habits at this point that allow them to progress properly. This now founded front six is loaded with depth and great talent, at all levels, really. The tail is a tad different in the secondary. Experience is concerning. Have 2 good safeties. Expect them to be leaders while this cornerback groups. Again, they should be protected in this scheme, meaning they will struggle while they learn, but it shouldn't cause this team to blatantly lose games. And I think that's going to be paying dividends for them. Overall, this is a defense, Nick, I'm very excited for because, again, they return so much talent. Do add some guys like Downs transfer out. You also had a lot of, depth pieces that probably weren't going to contribute as much as some of those 4- and 5-star edge rushers I talked about who didn't play last year, but are going to have big impacts this season.
Like I said, super excited for this defense. I think the sky is the limit. I do like the new schematic change. Obviously, losing Saban, who was a defensive guy, is tough, but he'll still be around the program. A lot of these guys are still his guys. We're bringing in new talented players. On the defensive side of the ball, Keeley, I think, is excited to see him break out. I really think this Alabama defense can be very solid this year.
Now, looking at the schedule preview and prediction, Nick Saban's gone, and obviously sentiment is shifted, and for good reason. In a tough conference with a tough schedule, especially on the road. Kalen DeBoer's offensive prowess mixed in with this quarterback and those wide receivers, I think FBS will quickly be put on notice. The offensive line is also magnificent. Although they might be an iffy scheme fit, I think we see a heavier dose from this run game to offset that. The defense has massive potential. Don't think the secondary is going to cost them. But if the pass rush fails to materialize, they can probably have some major issues. I'm very excited for this team. It's still an elite roster. Lots of upside. Biggest thing we want to see is, obviously the sentiment is shifting because with Nick Saban, what's gone with him leaving, accountability, physicality, furious defense, game time adjustments, discipline. A lot of that stuff was kind of already going out the window the past couple of years, Nick, because we watched Alabama, especially you being a graduate, very closely. Some of that stuff was kind of going out the window. Schedule prediction here for me, I don't like it, 12-0, but I've certainly found myself not able to predict them to lose some of these games. I think Nick Saban's going to be heavily involved in the defensive game plan at home against Georgia. At Tennessee, I think they can match up well with them. At LSU, they have a great offensive line with an iffy defense. I think this D-line can certainly compete. Oklahoma, I think this team's certainly another year away, and I think Alabama will match up well with them. Even though this is a very tough road schedule, Nick, I just don't see how these teams are going to beat Alabama because this is still an elite roster. This coach is new to the conference, but he's not new to football by any means. 12-0 is obviously very lofty, especially when the total is at 9.5. But how I see it is they're A on both sides of the ball, and I think this is going to be a well-coached football team, and I think you're going to see them start to thrive in some of those areas they were certainly struggling in the past couple of years under Saban.
No prediction from me as a fan of this program, an alumni of this university. I will not make a prediction, but like you were saying, in the end of the Saban era, we saw Alabama become uncharacteristically sloppy. A lot of mistakes. Games I'm thinking about immediately at the top of my head where there was a lot of penalty mistakes. 2019 at Auburn, 2022 at Texas, at Tennessee, 2021. Another one, there was a game in there, I'm blanking on the team, where they struggled on the road. At Auburn as well, another one where they struggled on the road with penalties, especially 2019. They had a big offsides late in the game. Texas, multiple bad penalties early in the game that certainly put them in a hole. They had a ton of penalties against Tennessee as well in that game. So certainly was an uncharacteristic discipline. You saw that with the latter era of Nick Saban. I think Kalen DeBoer plugs in as a fantastic coach. He's a proven winner. He won everywhere he was, won at Fresno State, won at Washington. Obviously, the jump from those conferences to the SEC and a school like Alabama is a tough jump, certainly, right? But he's going to get a big test early on with a road trip to Wisconsin. I'll be traveling to that game. I'm excited to attend that game. That's a tough road environment. And then playing Georgia, 2 weeks later at home, a very tough, first SEC game. What a way to start off your SEC career for Coach DeBoer. I do think this schedule has some tough games, right? At Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma. But I think those are games, all games Alabama can win. I think they're going to struggle at some points. I think, if you're going to pick a loss at some point, it's going to be one of those 3 games. I just think Alabama will be able to get ahead of those teams and find a groove later in the season. I think this offense with Milroe and the new scheme will be fantastic. I like the defense. I think the defensive hires and defensive playmakers and personnel in general are phenomenal. I'm very excited for this new era. Obviously, there are a lot of things that are going to be different in Alabama football, but I still think they have the incredibly loaded, talented roster that we're used to, and Alabama should be able to dominate. This could be a very exciting season in Tuscaloosa.
And again, I think Saban, at least for this year, is going to be heavily involved in some of those game plans for 2024, at least, especially against Georgia. That's a major game there. So I think 12-0 right now might change as we get closer to the season. Again, it's just kind of hard to pull the trigger on some of these games. They do play a lot of tough road ones, though, so I wouldn't be shocked to see them drop 1 or 2 of those, especially since you can afford to do that now in this new system. That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me breaking down Alabama.
Super excited for this new era. Absolutely cannot wait to see what Alabama does this year.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.